Hi everyone, I'm Ryan from the American Debunk, the site where we reveal and explain all the major Trump hoaxes in one place to give people a fair, undistorted view of President Trump. The media has worked around the clock to distort Trump, giving him a negative image because they know a large portion of the American public do not vote based on policy, but rather the socially acceptable choice. We hear it all the time. People will say they like Trump's policies but can't vote for him. They can't vote for someone who's called Nazis fine people, or killed the border bill so that he had an issue to run on, or told Americans to drink bleach, or call fallen soldiers suckers and losers. And that is why our goal is to show the truth behind these hoaxes, breaking each one down by the techniques used to create and spread them so that you can make an informed decision. We want all Americans to have an undistorted image of Trump and access to all the information. Before we dive in, remember you can always visit AmericanDebunk.com to explore the full collection of Trump hoaxes and see exactly how each one was made. With Hoaxology 101, we break down each technique the media and politicians use to create and spread these narratives, linking each method directly to its corresponding hoax. All right, so let's get into it. We'll start with the Fine People hoax, which is known as the tentpole hoax. Now, it's often called the tentpole hoax because it serves as the anchor in the public's perception, creating an initial belief that Donald Trump was sympathetic to white supremacists or even a white supremacist himself. In persuasion, an anchor is a fixed point that shapes a person's beliefs. Once this belief takes hold, it becomes difficult to change. People tend to interpret all subsequent information in line with their initial understanding. In this case, the hoax anchored a perception of Trump as a white supremacist, making it hard for people to see him in any other light. This creates confirmation bias, where every action or statement he makes is interpreted through this distorted lens, reinforcing the original misconception. By shaping the public perception early, the Fine People hoax became the foundation upon which the other hoaxes or accusations of racism or anything else were more easily believed, as they seemed to confirm what people already knew. The Fine People hoax claims that President Trump called neo-Nazis and white supremacists at the 2017 Charlottesville rally very fine people. Since then, it's been repeated widely, including by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, to paint Trump as sympathetic to hate groups. Joe Biden even claimed the reason why he was running for office in 2020.
And you had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
So that's where media will cut it. And a lot of the public, especially Democrats, have not seen what Trump goes on to say. They do a selective edit right there, so you don't see any of his other remarks, which are super important. So here's what you missed. Let's let it roll and see what we got.
And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay?
You can see when they don't cut out the context and you get the full clip that Trump explicitly condemns the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists. So this hoax was created using two primary techniques, selective editing and strategic ambiguity. The media selectively quoted only part of Trump's comments, but repeatedly aired his very fine people remark while ignoring his clear condemnation of neo-Nazis and white nationalists. The selective reporting let audiences fill in the missing context, leading them to believe he praised white supremacists. Visuals of the violent rally paired with Trump words made the false narrative even more powerful, reinforcing the public misconception that he sympathized with these groups. This combination of selective quotes and disturbing imagery shaped public perception and left the hoax unchallenged in the minds of many Americans. Now for the enemy from within hoax, which is relatively new. This hoax claimed that Trump will use the military against Americans if he wins the 2024 election. During an October 13th interview on Fox News, Trump discussed concerns about possible unrest on Election Day, saying the National Guard or military might be needed if left-wing radicals cause disruption. However, the media twisted this, suggesting Trump was planning to use armed force against his political opponents, sparking fears of authoritarianism.
Donald Trump intends to use the United States military against American citizens who simply disagree with him. People he calls, quote, the enemy from within.
In reality, Trump only suggested that if unrest occurred on Election Day, a military or National Guard response might be a last resort to keep order. He never urged for military action, as some headlines claimed, but rather described it as a hypothetical, extreme measure. Media outlets like the Washington Post and CNN misrepresented his statements to sound as if he endorsed military force against Americans. He also used enemy within recently in two separate contexts. Once to refer to radical government figures, and again to refer to potential agitators on Election Day. These quotes were combined to distort his remarks. This hoax used out-of-context quoting and circular reporting. Media outlets selectively edited Trump's if necessary statement, turning his words into a supposed threat. One or two outlets initially published sensational headlines and others repeated them without adding context, giving the false narrative credibility. This was further amplified by figures like Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, who echoed the claim at rallies and online. Through selective quoting and circular reporting, this hoax created a false picture of Trump advocating for authoritarian measures. Now we have the bloodbath hoax. This hoax centers around the false claim that President Trump threatened there would be a bloodbath if he lost the 2024 election. This narrative, propagated by misinterpreted statements and out-of-context quotes, created a climate of fear and misinformation. The hoax has been used by media platforms and Democratic leaders to mislead the public about Trump's rhetoric and intentions, suggesting Trump supporters will be unleashed in a wave of violence should he lose.
He is their revenge and retribution. When in God's name have you ever heard of another president say something like that? And he promised a bloodbath when he loses again. We have to take this seriously. 8 years ago, he could have written off as just Trump talk, but no longer.
Take a look at what really happened. Trump was speaking figuratively about a decline in the car industry. The claim that Trump threatened a bloodbath if he lost the 2024 election is a clear misrepresentation of his words. In reality, Trump was speaking figuratively about a decline in the car industry, emphasizing the potential economic downturns under certain policies. Let's take a look.
Mexico has taken, over a period of 30 years, 34% of the automobile manufacturing business in our country. Think of it. Went to Mexico. China now is building a couple of massive plants where they're going to build the cars in Mexico and they think that they're going to sell those cars into the United States with no tax at the border. Let me tell you something to China. If you're listening, President Xi, and you and I are friends, but he understands the way I deal, those big monster car manufacturing plants that you're building in Mexico right now, and you think you're going to get that, you're going to not hire Americans, and you're going to sell the cars to us. Now, we're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole, that's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. But they're not going to sell those cars. They're building massive factories. A friend of mine,
where else, and they like the very fine people hoax, the Russiagate hoax, all these different things that they've done. They tried to pin on you. That's like, it's a clear distortion of what you actually said.
The bloodbath hoax.
Yeah,
I was talking about the auto industry.
Yes.
It's a bloodbath because Japan and China are taking our auto. And I said, it's a bloodbath. They said, he used the word bloodbath.
He said, if you don't win, it's going to be a bloodbath because they're going to take over.
Right.
That's exactly what you said.
It's a terrible thing they do.
But that's.
During his speech, it was evident to those watching that his comments were about the metaphorical impact on the auto industry, not a literal threat of violence. However, the context was deliberately distorted and removed through selective video editing. This allowed Democrats and some media outlets to misquote him and propagate this false narrative. This misrepresentation not only misleads the public, but also underscores the ongoing issue of media bias and political manipulation. We'll take a look at the abortion ban hoax now. And this hoax asserts that Trump, if reelected, will enact a national abortion ban. Despite Trump's repeated statements that he wouldn't pursue such a policy, media outlets and political opponents have circulated this narrative portraying him as a direct threat to abortion rights nationwide.
And look, Donald Trump's not done. He would ban abortion nationwide. Yes, even here in Pennsylvania, if he were successful. He would restrict access to birth control, put IVF treatments at risk, and force states to monitor women's pregnancies. Just Google Project 2025, read the plans for yourself. And let us agree, one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree the government shouldn't be telling people what to do.
Trump said that he will never sign an abortion ban at the federal level. He also believes that abortion should be left up to the states for them to make their own decisions. And Trump has also said that he would veto a national abortion ban.
To put it simply, it's now up to the states. And like Ronald Reagan, I'm a believer in the exceptions, the 3 exceptions, as you know, and rape, incest, life of the mother, the danger for the life of the mother. And we have a situation now where it's in the states' hands, and the states are going to be voting. The last thing people want, the people are going to be voting. The last thing people want is for that to go back into the federal government. It was always fought, and very importantly, and people wanted it, they wanted it back in the states, where it belongs legally and for a lot of other reasons.
So you wouldn't support a national ban?
No, I wouldn't support a national ban. No, I would not.
The Trump will ban abortion hoax uses selective reporting and appeals to fear to make a false narrative about Trump's stance. Here's how these techniques work. With selective reporting, media outlets focus on Trump's role in appointing Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe v. Wade without mentioning his stated position on keeping abortion laws at the state level. This one-sided reporting left out his recent statements, including his declaration that he would veto a national ban. By framing Trump as a threat to abortion access, political opponents have leveraged fear-based messaging to rally voters who support abortion rights. This tactic sways undecided voters and mobilizes the base, even when Trump's actual position suggests otherwise. Now for the Trump threatened to kill Liz Cheney hoax, also known as the firing squad hoax. On October 31st, 2024, media outlets reported that Donald Trump made a violent threat to kill former Congresswoman Liz Cheney during a campaign event with Tucker Carlson in Arizona. According to these reports, Trump's comments indicated he was endorsing harm against Cheney. Known as one of Trump's most vocal Republican critics regarding the 2020 election and January 6, Cheney was recently seen campaigning alongside Kamala Harris, urging Republicans to unite against Trump. Now let's take a look at this 10-second clip from our friend, Aaron Rupar, where this hoax originates.
Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. You know, when the guns are trained on her face.
In reality, Trump's remarks were a critique of politicians like Cheney, who, in his view, are quick to support U.S. involvement in foreign wars, sending young Americans, your children, into dangerous conflicts abroad. His hyperbolic comments about Cheney were meant to highlight her war hawkish stance, illustrating a politician who supports policies that send Americans into harm's way without end. The remark was a rhetorical device, not an actual call for violence, pointing out how disconnected policymakers can be from the real consequences of their decisions on American lives. Let's watch the full clip and see what context they did not want you to see.
And Cheney was he said, I really want to thank you. He said, now I'm so glad that I actually endorsed you. It's amazing, but that you would do this. And I didn't speak to him about it. But then, go a couple of years forward or go now. And I don't blame him for sticking with his daughter. But his daughter is a very dumb individual, very dumb. She's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. When the guns are trained on her face. They're all war hawks when they're sitting in Washington in a nice building saying, oh, gee, let's send 10,000 troops right into the mouth of the enemy. But she's a stupid person. And I'd have meetings with a lot of people, and she always wanted to go to war with people. So whether it's her, whether it's Dick, I was surprised a little bit with Dick Cheney. I didn't know him at all. I only had essentially the 1 or 2 phone calls, and it was only a call saying, thank you very much for doing that for Scooter Libby. That was nice. And Scooter Libby, by the way, was beyond that. He couldn't believe that it happened. Nobody would do it. They should have done that for him years before. But I was a little surprised because I actually thought that Dick Cheney would go with me over his daughter, and he didn't. And you know what? I understand it. It's your daughter, and you go. But she's a bad person.
The media misrepresented Trump's remarks about Liz Cheney by quoting him out of context, presenting his hyperbolic language as literal, and selectively reporting on and editing his statements. This approach omitted his broader critique of war policies, making his rhetorical comments appear as a personal, literal threat against Cheney. By focusing only on isolated phrases and selectively editing the video, outlets crafted a narrative that framed his remarks as an endorsement of violence rather than political criticism. The Fine Folks hoax refers to claims about the phone call between then-President Donald Trump and Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger on January 2, 2021. Critics and media outlets have often cited Trump's phrase, find 11,780 votes, as proof he was pressuring Raffensperger to illegally manufacture votes to alter Georgia's 2020 election results.
11,780 votes. Go find me 11,780 votes. Go do that. January 2nd, 2021. Those were Donald Trump's words as the sitting president of the United States to Georgia, the state of Georgia's top election officials. Go find me 11,780 votes. Donald Trump, as president, had the top election officials from the state of Georgia on the phone. And Trump told them to go find him 11,780 votes. Donald Trump, as the sitting president of the United States, told Georgia's election officials to go cheat, to go break the law, to overthrow Georgia's election. Trump did that. It's on tape. You've heard it. I've heard it hundreds of times.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
The Find Votes hoax used several techniques to create a misleading narrative. The phrase, I just want to find 11,780 votes, was taken from a longer conversation implying that Trump was asking for manufactured votes, when in context, he was referencing his belief that an audit would reveal sufficient irregularities. Media outlets and critics often use this quote to portray Trump as requesting the illegal creation of votes, omitting his calls for signature verification and his broader arguments in the discussion. News reports and commentators largely focused on Trump's fine votes quote, ignoring his other remarks in the call about the election fraud, ballot concerns, and recount procedures. By isolating one sentence from the conversation, the media helped craft the misleading narrative that Trump wanted Raffensperger to produce votes out of thin air. The October 24 Atlantic hoax. On October 22, 2024, The Atlantic published an article alleging that former President Donald Trump expressed a wish for generals similar to those in Nazi Germany and made a crude remark about covering the cost of burying U.S. soldier Vanessa Guillen after her tragic death. The article surfaced just weeks before the election, sparking strong reactions and renewed scrutiny of Trump's past statements and relationships with the military.
2 weeks from Election Day, as the final battleground sprint is underway. Every hour matters for these candidates as they try to reach as many voters as possible in the key states that will decide this election. For Donald Trump, that meant speaking at a roundtable in Florida at his golf club, courting the Latino vote after that campaign stop. A new report that Trump, while president, used the F word to describe a murdered Mexican-American soldier. That story is that Trump scoffed at the price of a funeral he offered to pay for Private Vanessa Guillen, something Trump's team tonight denies.
Confirmed that while Donald Trump was president, he said he wanted generals like Adolf Hitler had.
The Atlantic's article presents two main claims: that Donald Trump expressed a desire for Hitler-like generals, and that he had made an insensitive remark about covering funeral costs. Both claims rely on classic hoax techniques, which have been observed in previous debunked stories about Trump. In the case of Vanessa Guillen, her sister Myra Guillen and family members were vocal in their condemnation of the Atlantic article, expressing disgust over the claim that Trump insulted Vanessa or made remarks about the cost of her burial. The Atlantic's article failed to include statements from Guillen's family, opting instead to rely on anonymous sources. Additionally, Trump supporters have pointed to owner Laurene Powell Jobs' association with Vice President Kamala Harris, including her attendance at Harris's 2017 Senate swearing-in. This connection raises questions about whether The Atlantic is pushing stories that might benefit Harris's ticket. The publication has notably avoided scrutinizing Harris's knowledge of the President Biden's fitness for a second term or challenging her on significant election topics.
There's a baby that was murdered. They threw him. It's just hard to say. An innocent life of child was thrown from the barracks room all the way from the top of the building to the floor. And it happened on a military base, and an innocent child died. Why? Why is that happening? They have to be investigated.
So was this at Fort Hood also?
I believe Fort Hood.
When would you like to have the funeral? When?
As soon as possible.
As soon as possible, I agree. As soon as possible with the funeral. We'll make sure that happens.
Yeah,
okay,
es que tienen que entregármela ya. Thank you. Ya porque
where will you have the funeral? Do you know?
Houston.
In Houston?
Yeah.
All right. And if I can help you out with the funeral, I'll help you out. I'll help you out financially. I'll help you.
I think the military maybe can take care of it.
Good. They'll do military. That's good. If you need help, I'll help you out.
Thank you.
Okay. If they need something, we'll take care. We'll make sure she is very respected.
The Atlantic's article on Trump uses specific, unverified claims presented without counterpoints or context, creating a one-sided narrative that encourages a negative perception of him. Key allegations rely on anonymous sources, a tactic seen in previous Trump stories, like the Atlantic's Debunked 2020 article, where he was said to have called fallen soldiers suckers and losers. This reliance on unverifiable sources means readers cannot assess the credibility of those making the accusations, and the claims circulate without accountability. The story gained momentum through credibility laundering as numerous outlets repeated the allegations without further investigation, creating an echo chamber effect that embedded these unverified claims into public perception. Hunter's laptop is Russian misinformation hoax. In the lead up to the 2020 presidential election, numerous intelligence experts and media outlets claimed that Hunter Biden's laptop was part of a Russian disinformation campaign. Despite mounting evidence confirming the laptop's authenticity, this narrative was widely disseminated, influencing public perception before the election.
Go ahead.
No, I probably best I don't.
Obviously, we're not going with the New York Post story right now on Hunter Biden.
This is really one of the stupidest October surprises I've ever seen.
It helps to really view this as storytelling, not so much as news coverage, but as political entertainment.
NPR explained, we don't want to waste our time on stories that are not really stories.
Who even thought to make that story up?
It's a story that many intelligence experts say has all the hallmarks of a foreign interference campaign.
It looks like it's tied to Vladimir Putin in Moscow.
This is a Russian intelligence disinformation campaign.
It's foreign intelligence operation.
Foreign intelligence operation. Russian intelligence.
Rudy Giuliani was not fed passively Russian disinformation. He ordered it off the menu.
This is a classic example of the right-wing media machine.
And he's in the midst of a scandal.
He's not.
And he's taking... Of course he is, Leslie.
We should note Hunter Biden isn't running for president. That argument has been debunked.
There is no evidence that Joe Biden did anything wrong.
For all we know, these emails are made up.
It just lacks credibility.
Okay, I would love if you guys would start doing that digging and start doing that verification.
No, we're not going to do your work for you.
Character matters. It matters. Telling the truth matters. Being a good person matters.
I don't know why I'm crying.
The laptop and its contents have been verified as authentic, with no credible evidence linking it to a Russian disinformation effort. The initial allegations dropped on October 14, 2020. The New York Post published an article on October 14, 2020, alleging that a laptop belonging to Hunter Biden contained compromising information about his business dealings and personal life. The laptop was reportedly abandoned at a Delaware repair shop and later handed over to Rudy Giuliani, President Trump's personal attorney. Twitter and Facebook then took steps to limit the spread of the New York Post article, citing concerns over disinformation and hacked material policies. Twitter initially banned links to the article and later revised its approach after the backlash. Facebook limited the article's distribution pending a third-party fact-check informed by an FBI warning about the potential foreign interference. On October 19, 2020, 51 former senior intelligence officials released an open letter stating that the release of the alleged emails, quote, has all the classic earmarks of Russian information operation. The officials emphasized that they did not have concrete evidence of Russian involvement, but were suspicious based on their experience with Russian disinformation tactics. Quote, it is for all these reasons that we write to say that the arrival on the U.S. political scene of emails purportedly belonging to Vice President Biden's son Hunter, much of it related to this serving on the board of the Ukrainian gas company Burisma. Quote, if we are right, this is Russia trying to influence how Americans vote in this election, and we believe strongly that Americans need to be aware of this. We do not know whether these press reports are accurate, but they do suggest concern within executive branch departments and agencies that mirror ours. It is high time that Russia stops interfering in our democracy. Politico published a story headlined, Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinfo, dozens of former Intel officials say, which shaped public perception of the laptop controversy. During the final presidential debate of 2020 and in subsequent interviews, Joe Biden cited the letter, inaccurately stating that it provided the laptop story was a Russian disinformation campaign. On May 22, 2024, prosecutors used Hunter Biden's real laptop as evidence in his trial for allegedly unlawfully obtaining a firearm in 2018. Special counsel David Weiss confirmed the authenticity of the laptop, stating it contained significant evidence supporting the charges against Biden, including details of his drug use around the time of the firearm purchase. Despite Hunter Biden pleading not guilty, the trial, now postponed to September, could coincide with the 2024 election. And by the time this video is published, it is November 2nd, 2024.
Experts say it has all the hallmarks of information laundering.
This looks like your classic disinformation campaign.
Eric O'Neill is a former FBI operative.
Steal the information with a cyber attack, get the emails from Hunter Biden's account, and then put them on these laptops that are left at a repair store. And that's how the information is now laundered into the public.
Who do you think is behind this?
Well, the Russians would be my number one guess.
The goal of these incidents appears to be the same: to cast a cloud over the frontrunner in the closing weeks of the campaign, using a drip, drip, drip of emails that create the air of scandal, even though Republican-led congressional investigations have never uncovered any evidence of wrongdoing by Vice President Biden.
Confident, based on your analysis, this is Hunter Biden's data and that it's real?
Yes.
Lanterman and his son, Sean, both digital forensic experts, recovered images of credit cards, a driver's license, social security number.
Just the sheer volume of what we're dealing with, it would be difficult, if not impossible, to fabricate.
Mr. Biden has consistently denied knowledge of his son's work or financially benefiting from it.
I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business.
After 2 years of scrutiny, the laptop has not produced evidence President Biden directly benefited from his son's business deals.
The Hunter Biden laptop hoax emerged through speculative reporting and statements from intelligence experts. Shortly after the New York Post published its October 2020 story detailing the laptop's contents, 51 former intelligence officials issued a letter suggesting the story had all the classic earmarks of a Russian disinformation operation. By leveraging the credibility of these officials, the letter cast doubt on the laptop's authenticity, influencing public perception and media narratives. Major outlets ran with this angle, often without rigorous fact-checking, framing the laptop story as part of a sophisticated foreign plot. This approach overshadowed evidence confirming the laptop's authenticity and the lack of any credible link to Russian disinformation. As a result, a significant portion of the public came to believe the laptop story was a foreign interference tactic just before the 2020 election. The drinking bleach hoax. During a COVID-19 press briefing on April 23, 2020, President Donald Trump speculated about possible treatments against the virus, including the potential use of UV light as a disinfectant. However, media outlets quickly circulated a narrative suggesting that Trump advised Americans to inject or drink bleach to cure COVID-19.
I just hope he, and I'm sure he won't, just don't engage with the buffoonery that Donald Trump wants to be in. We know these debates are not real life. I've been governor long enough. I served under both with President Trump and President Biden. And with President Trump, it was always, fighting with my neighbors to get ventilators during COVID and telling my citizens to drink bleach. With Joe Biden, it's about real solutions. So I just think be himself. Give us a positive vision for America, one that impacts our families, and just don't get caught up in the grievance stuff that Donald Trump will bring.
But what really happened? Trump referred to UV light as a disinfectant. During the briefing, Trump referenced UV light as a disinfectant after Dr. William Bryant of the Department of Homeland Security discussed the effectiveness of sunlight in killing the virus on surfaces. Trump then asked speculative questions about whether UV light as a disinfectant could potentially be studied for internal use, stating, quote, "Suppose we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light, supposing you brought the light inside the body," end quote. He later mentioned disinfectants, asking, is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost as a cleaning? But again, he was referring to UV light as the disinfectant. Anyway, these were hypothetical musings rather than medical instructions or recommendations. The transcript and the video footage show Trump musing and asking questions rather than suggesting people ingest disinfectants or bleach. In fact, some fact-checking organizations, including PolitiFact, have debunked claims that Trump advised Americans to drink or inject bleach. It's important to note that at the time of this press conference, there were companies who were testing and researching UV light as disinfectant to treat COVID. And yes, they were bringing it inside the body to seeing if it worked. Thanks everyone for watching. Remember, you can find full debunks of the major Trump hoaxes over at AmericanDebunk.com. All the links and sources are included for each hoax, so you can dive into the details yourself. Please share the site with everyone you know before the November 5th election. It's more important than ever to spread the truth. God bless America.